Hello, everyone, and welcome to this bonus episode of the Hired Geek Podcast, episode number 106, with Cathy Lucas from the Metropolitan State University of Denver. She comes to the episode with a wealth of experience, just talks a lot about how her institution has been adaptable through 2020 and all the disruptions that have occurred, and how she's engaged with her community and stakeholders and students and faculty and staff and everybody to really just make sure that everyone is kind of coalescing around shared values of the institution, that their community knows exactly where the institution stands on all the issues that are coming up and are up to date on what is going on and all the things that are needed to know by students around digital learning and all that good stuff. So it was just a great conversation. Appreciate everything that Cathy shared. We called out quite a few good podcasts to check out. So definitely look for those in the show notes, as well as information about our new merch store. And as of this release of the episode, this is October 28th in 2020. If you're listening to it as a new release, there is a sale going on in our merch store through the end of the week. So definitely go check that out in the show notes as well. But after this brief message from our sponsor, this is the bonus episode number 106 with Cathy Lucas. This episode is sponsored by Degree.me, a one-stop college research tool for students. If you work for a college or university, you'll want to learn all about their ability to connect you with the right students at a budget-friendly price. To find out more, please visit degree.me/HEG. Yeah, super excited to talk with you, Cathy. This has been an episode that's been a long time coming. We've been working on finding a good time to talk through your professional journey and just kind of your position and experience, just kind of thinking strategically about the work in higher education that's happening right now. That's obviously super unique for a lot of people, really unprecedented. So it's just really time well spent to talk through this and, how you're viewing the work that you're doing, supporting your students, and share that out with everybody. So I really appreciate you taking out the time. And we'll start out as we always do. If you do want to give a brief introduction of yourself and your professional journey of how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, sure. Well, Dustin, first of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate your time today too. So I'm the Vice President of Strategy and External Affairs at Metropolitan State University of Denver, and we are a regional comprehensive university. We're 55 years young. And, we like to say that we empower our students to advance their lives and careers through an innovative and transformational education. Today, we have nearly 100,000 career-ready graduates and more of 80% of those who stay in Colorado. So in my role, I work to really enhance the reputation and the public perception of the university, doing this through integrated marketing and internal and external communications and external affairs. I've been at MSU Denver for 22 years. I started as a media relations manager, and I grew to the director of communications and then an associate vice president and now the VP. And, I've always continued to take on more responsibility and different work throughout the years. And I have to say, I've had the benefit of someone believing in me early on and giving me a chance to prove myself, to grow and to thrive. I've worked to build our brand from a college that was deemed the school of last hope to now a real vibrant urban university that's adaptable and innovative and makes bold decisions. And during my tenure, we changed the university's name. We've added master's programs. We've built several buildings, including a hotel on campus. We implemented a special tuition rate for our undocumented students, and this was before DACA. And we've created a lot of buzz along the way.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, just over that length of time, just so much that you've been able to see. And I think, it can be, unfortunately not as common as maybe it used to be, of like people really building their career at one place. And like, obviously you have the benefit of so much knowledge of the context that your institution has worked in over all that time, and just really like committing to kind of a longer term vision of what can be and kind of working towards that versus any just kind of short-term goals, any of those things. Cause obviously like building things and, all that takes a lot of time and, preparing for that. And then really just making sure that, you're kind of doing the best work that you can with any of these, new things that are coming up and maybe stuff that hasn't been working as well. You just having that longer term experience and longer term vision, I'm sure has been super helpful. So I think, we can kind of build on that, and maybe how that has played a part in, you kind of growing at your institution there. So like, kind of taking some time to talk a little bit more about the work that you're doing now, and, I guess giving us some kind of segue and kind of leadway into that. And then certainly, if you want to just talk through any anecdotes of how the work that you're doing now also has changed with this current climate. So, just kind of carry us through, I guess, chronologically, through to this current moment, and then just how it's been changing over these past several months.
Yeah, sure. And I think, to your point, it's like I have what's called institutional knowledge.
Right.
Yeah, but, I can always go back. But yeah, so, my approach has always been to develop a strategy where we can integrate aspects of the university's culture into core messages, and then connect our brand with events or moments that, we really stand for. And we've taken a storytelling strategy of sharing what's possible for our students. Our brand campaign, our advertising campaign right now is Reimagine Possible. And that, I think that really, it's really relevant and really makes sense. We're allowing our students to really reimagine what's possible. But one of the strategies that we did was 3 years ago, we took our traditional public relations and communications approach, and we flipped it on its head, honestly, with brand journalism. And I know you'll probably are going to ask, well, what is brand journalism? Because I'm ready to tell you. But it's where we engage our audience through real reporting and lively storytelling. And so that's the journalism side. And then with our university experts and experiences, and that's the branding. And we've used brand journalism to provide relevant content through articles and video about Denver and Colorado, while intentionally highlighting a faculty member or a university program in those stories. And so the strategy is to make sure that the content isn't only relevant to our students and our alumni and our employees, but also that our readership extends to the business community and to the legislature and the news media. And our readers will then, the intent is that our readers will then share our stories with their networks and really increasing the reach of our storytelling. But one area where we've been successful is with the news media, where we have written a story or produced a video. We've shared it with the news media, and sometimes they've just picked it up as is and just repurposed it. And so that's really been the goal of brand journalism and, kind of how we pivoted our strategy. But once COVID hit, like every other comms office, we moved into crisis communication mode. And we began mapping out a strategy on how we not react, but respond with messaging to first our employees and our students, and then to our external stakeholders. And so I believe from March until August, we created nearly 100 different communication pieces on COVID, the financial crisis, and Black Lives Matter. And these came from our president, from board members, from our senior leaders. And then we ramped up our brand journalism program during this time as well to focus on our great faculty experts, whether it was mental health or diversity, equity, inclusion. But then we also told some stories about some of our faculty who were doing really innovative and cool things while campus was closed. One example was we had a engineering faculty member who came onto campus in April and went into our Advanced Manufacturing Institute and used that additive manufacturing space to create PPC materials for local hospitals. So, we profiled that story. We're very proud of this faculty member. And, this was one of the examples. But during this time, our brand journalism publication, which is called RED, stands for Relevant Essential Denver. Red is also our brand color. But this is a biweekly curated publication, and during that time, it's distributed to about 100,000 people. Our click-through rate doubled in April, May, and June, because more people were getting these stories. They were able to take the time and read it while they were in lockdown, and so we really jumped on that. But then the other component that we pivoted to was our advertising campaign. And so fall of 2019, we had launched a advertising campaign, the Reimagine Possible that I described. But in the spring, we decided to pivot our campaign to really drive student enrollment. We felt because of our innovative education and our urban location that we could be a great alternative for many students who might be taking a gap year, but also students that were looking to upskill both during and then after the pandemic. So part of our strategy was TV advertising, in April and May, because there was a increased viewership of TV advertising. And I can't tell you how many people saw our 15-second ads on Hulu, local TV channels, and then even TikTok. I have a 18-year-old and a 15-year-old, and both of them especially during COVID when we were on lockdown, they were on TikTok all the time. So we worked with our media buying agency to help us crack the code to get some advertisements onto TikTok, and that worked really well too. And then lastly, I would say during COVID, I've wanted to make sure that we ensure that we provide a strong connectivity to my team members, some who haven't been on campus since we closed in March. And so, whether it's our daily or weekly or monthly scheduled virtual meetings, we've made sure that we do, kind of icebreakers and games and, just keep it light and fun while we're going over important information. But also we implemented a weekly Connect with Your Colleague, where we had team members spend each week they're assigned to another team member, and they schedule a half-hour call or chat and just talk about personal stuff, not work-related, but just to get to know your colleagues better and really just do kind of a check-in. And then my executive assistant and I worked over the summer with a couple of local nonprofits to mail small gifts directly to our team members' homes, just to let them know that we were thinking about them. So in a nutshell, that's really what's been, we've been focusing on during COVID.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, just like kind of multi-pronged, just very kind of diverse digital strategy there of helping to obviously just do a variety of things, obviously just continue to promote yourself and your offerings and, reaching new potential students, and then just keeping your community kind of tightly knit and everything. So I kind of want to focus on the latter there of kind of the community stakeholders that you have, as you mentioned, faculty, staff, students, and everybody. Because really, just to make sure it's like really emphasized, because I think, this is obviously accelerating a lot of people thinking a lot more about their digital strategy, their digital community building, and all those sort of things. So to you, it does take a lot of time and effort, maybe some like new tools that you have to learn and all that. But what makes it worth that effort? Like, what makes this so important to make sure that you're communicating with all of these stakeholders during this time? Because again, I think some institutions and organizations are kind of, recoiling back and trying to just kind of maybe bide their time until they can kind of just get back to what they were doing before. So, what makes this so important, so worth the time and effort and resources?
Yeah, I mean, I just think, with communications, you have to be thinking about your stakeholders at all times and the many different lenses, right? I always look at it as, we're focusing on building our brand. We're driving student enrollment. We're building statewide support through advocacy, for funding for higher ed. And then we're continuing to demonstrate our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's a lot of stakeholders, so you've got to use a lot of different vehicles to do that. And to your point, some of it is through this well-crafted digital strategy. Some of it is through personal emails and texts and outreach. A lot of it is through social. But then we've also done a lot of town hall meetings with our various stakeholders. We've done town hall meetings with our students, and we've done a few with our alumni. We just did our welcome back for our faculty and staff a couple of weeks ago, with our president. And, over the summer and this fall, we've also been doing some outreach with our external stakeholders, because we have some, business and community members that really want to know how they can help, which is great. But they also want to know, what are we doing? What are you guys doing with diversity? How are you, you're the most diverse university in Colorado, but what are you really doing to ensure that your students feel that they've got that, that they're feeling, your inclusion efforts are resonating with them? So we've had a lot of virtual town hall meetings, and that's proven to be really successful too. We've gotten great feedback on that afterwards, and just the other great thing about virtual town hall meetings is I think our attendance for that has probably tripled. That's been another great effort as well.
Because some of these I feel like we're just continually building off of what you've been mentioning, which is great, of kind of the other stuff I wanted to talk about. But because I think that's, to me, just a very important aspect of this is like recognizing like you can reach more people through all these efforts, and that is important. Like people can jump on or maybe like watch a recording of a town hall if you kind of make that available on demand. And then I think again, all of it is time well spent, because you're not just sort of, because I feel like this comes up in maybe in different kind of facets. It's just sort of, which this absolutely is kind of, I think, eroded over the past several years, but just sort of like higher institutions just kind of like, well, we've built it, so they will come. People know who we are. We're here. We'll get students. No big deal. But like, obviously that's kind of eroded. Like you've got to really market it yourself and put yourself out there just so people know who you are and your offerings. But I think, with what you're saying too, like, you have to make it really clear, because I think so much more now in the past couple of years, people are kind of voting with their feet, voting with their dollars, that sort of thing of like, I want to make sure that I'm supporting organizations or being a part of communities that embody my values, and make it really clear, for your institution, like, this is what we're about. Like, we are, kind of showing our work and just making it known what we're doing, especially in the kind of diversity and equity and inclusion space. I think some institutions are just going to say like how you mentioned, like, oh, we're just the most diverse institution in the state. So, just kind of, all right, like we're done or whatever. It's like, no, I mean that, and, here's, what else we're working on as an organization or what we're doing for students and those sort of things. So again, it's important to show your work in that way and make sure that your values are known so that people can really see versus just like, assuming that they understand, like that, I don't know, they know, because it's such like everybody's got a lot going on. So, yeah, you're going to continue to put yourself out there and make sure that you are really prominent and all that. So I'm curious, because again, this is, uncharted territory for a lot of folks. And I mean, it sounds like you've been kind of thinking in this kind of mindset for quite some time in terms of like communications with stakeholders and that sort of thing. But I mean, just anything like in hindsight that you feel like you would have maybe done differently, or any moments, because again, I would expect it for anybody in these circumstances, but I think I'm always curious to hear of just like reflection is like, oh, I wish we would have done more of this or less of that, even, like any of that kind of stuff in this current moment. Yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I think one obvious thing that I wish we could have explained to students and parents and the greater community sooner is synchronous versus asynchronous. So when we went to remote learning in March, I think there were still a lot of people that didn't understand synchronous versus asynchronous. I mean, now that's a common term. I had a virtual gathering with a few friends last week, and that came up. And of course, it's coming up now because it's parents, and so they hear that a lot with K-12, and now they're hearing it in higher ed. But when we were first describing it, I think that was just such an academic term that a lot of people didn't understand it. So,
Right.
Something so simple, but I'm like, we could have had a glossary on that. But I think the other thing that I wish we would have done sooner, I would say maybe not, would be right now, a couple of weeks ago, we kicked off a weekly highlight of where we're doing a shout out from our president to a faculty member, a staff member, and a student each week. And so we push that out through, mainly through social, but also through our internal publication. And I wish we would have done that sooner, because I think just providing that connectivity and demonstrating, hey, here's a faculty member that's doing some really innovative work, and they're very student centered. It makes just that appreciation and just highlighting these great success stories. It kind of goes back to that don't tell me, but show me. And so I think that's one tactic that I wish we would have done sooner, but I'm so glad that we're doing it right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it makes me think, I was just listening to, he's a previous guest on the podcast, but Jeff Young, who hosts the EdSurge podcast, they have this like kind of campus diaries series that they're doing as, students and faculty are going through this fall term. And one thing that they mentioned was about just in the spirit of the first thing that you mentioned of just sort of unfamiliarity with kind of the jargon and the terminology of like digital education. Something else was that there's like, proctoring software and, these different things that you have to use if you're like taking an exam remotely, and people are just sort of like kind of weirded out of like, oh, wow, wait, so this is like watching me, or is it like capturing like, keystrokes, right? Like there's a lot of like confusion and sort of apprehension about these things. And it's really like, some people were noting, it's like, well, I mean, they went from like nothing, like you just kind of were in a room with somebody looking over you, and that's kind of familiar, to kind of what feels as though it's really like a dramatic shift. And, again, you could kind of get ahead of that if were a little bit more forthright with like explaining, okay, this is how we do digital education, the tools, and how things are done. So it made me think of that. I mean, yeah, that's definitely great advice, is that, as institutions are continuing to perhaps kind of just expand their digital education and bringing in students who have maybe never taken an online course before, kind of where are things at now? Like there's so much kind of complexity of the tools and the terminology and those sort of things. So it's, again, sort of a time well spent to be like, okay, or, do we have kind of like an online, orientation, like an onboarding of just kind of like the platforms and that sort of thing. And, even just like an ounce of effort there, I think is helpful to kind of normalize some things. But the second part kind of makes me think of my next question here of, looking more towards the future, because it sounds like that kind of shout outs and highlights effort that you're doing is something obviously that could absolutely just continue on, not just in this current moment, to make sure that, people feel connected as part of your community, even though they're apart. So yeah, this is something that's really just on my mind a lot, as institutions have done a lot more that they've never done before, is thinking like, are you going to still be doing that? Like say like a year from now, if things are better, are you going to still be doing all of this digital community building? Or, is it going to kind of like fizzle out because some people are just kind of begrudgingly doing things because they have to, there's no other way. So I'm curious kind of what your thoughts are of like, I mean, your work, but also like institutionally, anything you're aware of, and just kind of like what you've seen work really well and you feel like you're going to be committing to even kind of moving forward once, things are back to quote unquote normal.
Yeah. Well, and to go back to the, even online and doing, talking about jargon, we are working on a video right now for when we're for recruiting students of what you can expect from an online course, because there's a lot of misnomers out there. So we just want to have a video that's on our website that we'll be pushing out through social and other channels as well. But, if you're a student, it's just a quick 60-second video. What do I expect if I'm taking an online class? So that's one thing I wanted to mention. But yeah, I think things, the virtual space is changing everything that we're doing before to now. And so I've looked at a couple of things. One is working from home. So as a university, we never had a policy, and we didn't really encourage people to work from home. It just wasn't in our DNA at MSU Denver. And so now when we eventually return back to campus, I see this as a key part of how we'll do business. Because I've got a communications team, I've got a lot of team members that are in open space and they're in this really creative space. And so we're going to need to be looking at this. Do you need to be here physically 5 days a week? Could you come in 3 days a week and, work from home the other 2? And so, I think space, that's going to be something that's really looked at. I had read, it was in a New York Times article where companies were looking at, having their employees come in 2 days a week. And then Wednesday would, kind of be the cleaning day, if you will. And then Thursday, Friday, another cohort of employees coming in Thursday. Mm-hmm. So, that could be something too. But then another thing in higher ed as a whole is commencement, and really looking at how we do this differently. We, like many other higher ed institutions in the spring, we had decided to postpone our spring commencement for the fall because we had hoped that it would, we'd assumed that it would be in person and we'd be up and running and ready to go on that. Well, just last week, we had to send out not only to our fall graduates, but also to the spring graduates that we're going to be doing a virtual commencement ceremony. So, we've been really planning for that. And I'm just looking, as we're setting the stage for future commencements, I really believe there's going to be a virtual component. When we're back in person, I think now there's still going to be some kind of virtual component. So I just think it's not a matter of doing completely new things, but I think it's more doing things different and seeking how we make things better and relying on this experience that we've had the last few months to allow us to make it better.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's sort of on my mind is like there's certain things that I would hope continue if it's just, that's kind of like digital community building efforts of just being kind of respectful of like the modality to like, well, nope, you can only, take part in this if you're in person. If not, then you kind of miss out. It could be even at the bare minimum, again, just like, okay, well, we have a speaker and we record it. and then we upload, that high quality video to be available on demand on YouTube or elsewhere. But, it doesn't even have to be, live streamed at the same time, because sometimes that gets a little bit complex. But, and that's the idea of like, okay, well, we could do, this traditional commencement, but then, just have some sort of like virtual aspect to it to kind of bring people together. And I've thought about this a lot, and I'm hopeful that these things continue to be parts of conversations about how these, sort of seminal campus events and things are planned, since increasingly there's just going to be more and more entirely online students, or kind of hybrid students, or, just even for those like commuter adult learners who just may find it difficult to commit the time to go on campus for something, at any given time. So, and then it's even the other stuff of just like, if it's like, oh, well, we like created a Slack or a Discord community for our campus, or even like within like a certain school. It's like, just keep doing that. I mean, like, that's such a great platform. Like, it doesn't have to just be this thing where it's like, well, we're only doing this because we have to. It's like, well, I mean, I think increasingly nowadays you kind of have to do more of this digital community building. But, I'm just curious, as we see, the next, several months go on, if people's sort of persistence with these things continue, if they see sort of the kind of the return on their investment, and sort of feedback from students and faculty staff on the different efforts. So we will kind of move on here, I guess, of just with all that we've said, you've kind of mentioned that you're doing all the great work that your institution is doing. So with everything that you've learned and everything that you've done and everything that you're thinking about, like, just going through all these disruptions and everything, from your experience, like, what advice would you give to other higher ed professionals that are obviously just continuing to try to chart these choppy waters, and, not being able to see too far onto the horizon? Are there any kind of mantras or, things that kind of help resonate with you, to help you feel kind of motivated and inspired to keep, working through all these disruptions? Any other advice that you would give to other folks?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think right now we have such a greater sense of freedom to be, innovative and, experiment with new ideas, and whether that's communication or just ways of doing business. So part of my role is I lead the university's strategic plan. And pre-COVID, our strategic plan 2025 would have gone live July 1st. But in the spring, our president asked us to pause and take an approach from a futurist lens, and really look at scenarios on how they might frame the strategic plan. And, this was just so helpful in our thinking, because right now all bets are off. You can and you should be using this space to be more innovative. And, I go back, and as I'm doing the strategic plan, I'm looking at our university, where we were founded 55 years ago to meet our students where they are in their urban backyard. Well, today our student population, they've moved to the suburbs because they really can't afford to live in the city. But our mission is still has never been more intact or relevant to what I see as the higher ed needs of students today. I think we're doing this in a more innovative way through a stronger investment in technology and online courses. But this is also coupled with those connections with the business community, who really understand and believe in our mission, and really want students student like ours to be future employees. And so we've been working with them, and we've been trying to, foster these relationships. And now we're just doing it in such a more innovative way. We're having apprenticeship programs, and, we're building and creating, majors around these needs, and working with employers to really determine, what kind of employees are you looking for? So I just think being innovative right now, if you're not doing it, if you're just kind of pausing and kind of keeping your, just waiting to pop your head up when things are a little bit more stable, that's the wrong thing to do. Because I think you should really be disruptive and just be shaking things up and just looking at it differently from a different lens.
Yeah. And I mean, just with what you've talked about too, it could literally just be like, how does our team do the work that we need to do? Like, yeah, is it like, we have the flexibility for like, some of those like work from home days. And I know that even gets to the sort of value of like, okay, those work from home days, those are sort of like, no meeting days, just like kind of plug in, get work done. And then, we'll be together in person for the meetings that we need to have on a week to week basis or those sort of things. And then like kind of just larger picture, like you're saying, just sort of like, these partnerships and majors and programs and, kind of pipelines for internships or jobs or any of that kind of stuff that you're just like really like integrating. And I'm always just reassured by, because I completely agree with you that I think this is the time to maybe take some chances, think more bigger picture and longer term, like I kind of was talking about at the beginning of this episode. But because, I think that there's definitely, I can see it both ways, that some people are going to be more risk adverse right now as like budgets might get tight and those sort of things. It's like, I think you have to at least start to think about, as we've kind of had to like recoil and recalibrate, there are so many opportunities to innovate, looking towards the future and not just being like, well, when can we just get back to how things were and just kind of keep doing them the way that we were doing them before? Because absolutely, the world on the other side of this is going to be vastly different. So you're going to want to be, anticipating that a little bit, and just kind of, just thinking more long term. So I will emphasize as well the impetus for just like, this is the moment for innovation, because I definitely support that.
Yeah, and we're just not going to be returning to that, nor to the way things were. That's just, I don't see that as happening. So yeah, you just have to be trying to look ahead and just analyze these different scenarios of what you think might be happening, and it just helps you be better prepared.
Well, yeah, and I'd imagine, just really briefly here too, like I'd imagine, again, at this point, institutions can see like, oh, wow, there's a lot more demand for digital education than we may have thought that there'd been before. Like students are taking it up more readily. Like, maybe there wasn't as much of an impact on your retention and like, those sort of things, or just the feedback of like, wow, that, people have really enjoyed the way that we built our courses, and, those sort of things that could be like, okay, well then let's, invest more in that, and like take the cues maybe, from what has been happening and what, your stakeholders have thought of the efforts that you've done. And then, just like take the time that you have now to kind of plan and anticipate what you'll need to do to be sustainable for the future. So, with all that being said as well, I'm curious, like just in particular, because we always like to share our resources as much as we can. So anything that you'd like to highlight of maybe things that you've engaged with over the past several months, or just kind of like all-time favorites, of like resources of, books or podcasts or tools, websites, anything at all that you want to just give a tip of the hat to that we could include in the show notes?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, I'm a podcast geek, and I'm also a news junkie. So, my day really starts with the New York Times Daily, or Fox Today Explained, or What a Day. I mean, I just love, those are kind of how I just wake up and, walk and listen to those. I also love Mind Candy. And so I've been listening to those. I love listening to true crime podcasts. And right now I'm binging on Missing in Alaska, it's about two congressmen who vanished on a plane in the early 70s. Their plane vanished. And then fast forward to the 90s, the FBI started hearing stories that there were mob ties and that the plane was bombed. So it's a totally guilty pleasure, but so good. But to keep up to date, I mean, I get, the Chronicle and Inside Higher Ed, and then EAB. I think that's a great website with a lot of good resources. And then from a public relations lens, Reagan Communications. I mean, they've got a wealth of information on their website too. So yeah, there's a lot of information out there, and it's just ensuring that you spend the time, every morning or afternoon just to keep up and, read ahead so you're current and you're relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. When I like too that you kind of gave a wide spectrum of things, of just like the informative news podcast and the guilty pleasure podcast and everything. So, and I'll kind of memorialize here, like my current guilty pleasure, just because it's so silly and stupid, is a podcast called The Renner Files. So it's a sort of comedic spoof, like true crime investigative podcast. It's looking into actor Jeremy Renner's short-lived app that he made, which like it just was this like super weird story, but they're doing this like super deep dive into like, who is Jeremy Renner, why would he create an app, like why did it fail, and all this, like and it's just so like the idea of like a very deep and like seriously committed absurdity, which I can say that I personally appreciate, but I don't, because I've listened to it with my wife and she's like, this is so silly and stupid. I'm like, I know, and I love it. So the Runner Files. And yeah, I because I try to keep a healthy diet of podcast of I start with the daily and then I'll do some higher ed ones and then, just some other more silly ones. But yeah, just helps to keep the day, lively and vibrant and diverse and all that good stuff. So
yeah, absolutely. You got to recalibrate your brain every day. We're just online all the time and it's just focused on, so much serious content and matter all the time that, you got to keep it light too.
Yeah. Cause I do the same thing of take my dog out for a walk at least 2 or 3 times a day. So it's all right, cool. What am I listening to on this walk? Just plug something in and just, walk in, for right now, the beautiful fall weather and, enjoy that time away from, my computer and, just listen to something engaging. So, cool. Well, then we will wrap up, here with any final thoughts that you have. I think, kind of the larger picture topic here, certainly, communication and, the disruptions and changing, but, it's kind of all about higher ed adaptability. You've been working at your institution for a long time and, you've had a lot of different experiences there. And I'll just say it too. It resonates with me as well of what you kind of shared about, having someone kind of believe in you and kind of uplift you. And now you've been kind of set on this path to be doing this work for as long as you have. And, again, within all that time, having probably a lot of different contexts of, adapting and changing and improving. So with all of that being said, what are final thoughts that you have on higher ed adaptability that you'd want people to kind of leave this episode with?
Sure. 2 things I would say. So I'm always looking at ways to do things different and better. And I look at our mascot, the MSU Denver Roadrunner, and I don't know, you've probably never studied roadrunners, but the true roadrunner, the desert bird, it's a really adaptable bird. It's capable of flight, but it prefers to be on the ground and run, and it runs at 20 miles per hour or something. And they prefer sprinting, but they usually fly to escape predators or when traveling down steep slopes. And so, I've always applied that roadrunner spirit every day when I look for ways to, adapt, create, and collaborate. It's kind of what would the roadrunner do? Would you be flying right now or would you be, running? And so, I do that, but then I also look at the core values of the university. I try to focus on values instead of my fears. And our values it's cadre E squared. So it's communication, access, diversity, respect, entrepreneurial, and excellent. And, in everything that we do, I try to take that approach and ensure that we've got at least 2 to 3 core values into the communication approach that we're doing, or, whether it's a strategic plan or some other strategic work that we're doing. I always try to make sure that, it's grounded with our values.
That's such a great sentiment to end this episode because I just want to voice my support for that mentality. I think that's such an important way to kind of view decision making and where you're kind of operating from is more values based than fear based, and also just appreciate the kind of geeky, nerdy deep dive into roadrunners of what life lessons can you learn from this little animal, it's so perfect. And I think, just so relevant of kind of really trying to, solidify those values, make sure that they are prominent and decisions are made from those versus kind of just, that place of fear. Because I think that certainly that is a tempting side of kind of always and perhaps overly focusing on liabilities or just, we should avoid any potential complications or something that might seem like it's too hard. As long as you're keeping your North Star of your values, you can always know that you're making good decisions for your community and your stakeholders. And you can at least kind of really settle in with those. If you ever kind of had to, advocate for the decision that you made, you can always just kind of rest on knowing that it came from your values. So, so much great stuff, and just really appreciate, all the great work that you're helping to do with your institution and all the things that you've shared. And, we'll share all the resources and the things that you mentioned and all that in the show notes as usual. But thank you again so much for your time. This has been such a great conversation.
Yeah, Dustin, thank you. I truly enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.